Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good afternoon here in Stream A. We did in Stream B at least, and I hope you had a good coffee break. And it is time for some MENA Spotlight. Because the Middle East and North Africa offers significant opportunities for growth. However, recent events created uncertainty regarding regional stability, which of course can impact the trade sector negatively. So in this closing session, our two expert panelists will provide an honest assessment of the evolving risks and rewards in the region, and also identifying areas in industry likely to withstand the challenges and those at high risk due to political and security issues. Excuse me. Welcome on stage Hicham El Khaoudy, Managing Director and Head of GTB International at First Abu Dhabi Bank. And welcome back on stage Rebecca Harding, Independent Economist and founder of the firm Rebeccanomics. Great name, I have to say it again. First of all, you both have very impressive backgrounds. Can you tell the audience a bit more about yourselves? Rebecca, you go ahead.
Okay, so I am a lapsed academic economist. You can all start feeling sorry for me now. I have spent the last 10 years outside of academia and looking at trade and trade finance and what it takes to be an international business. My specialism is actually in trade and supply chains and political risk and sustainability. So I've done a lot of work on that recently. And yeah, it's a very great pleasure to be here.
Hicham.
Yeah, so I'm currently heading the trade and cash management business for First Abu Dhabi Bank in the international. That spans 18 countries, going from Far East, China, Singapore, India, but also in the US, Brazil, France, UK. And of course, the GCC area, which is part also of my scope. What's interesting on the background is that I started in fintech when it was called financial technology. That was my the first part of my career. Then I turned banker, then turned fintech founder with in a company here in Sweden called Mitigram, and then back to banking again. So thank you all for being with us here.
Yeah. Thank you, Hicham. Right now, it might be more difficult than ever to do trade with the Middle East. So let's deal with the elephant in the room first, and then move on to talk about all the opportunities that you see with trade and business in the MENA region. Because how does a panel that looks at political risks and opportunities get past the obvious question about the ongoing conflict and how it affects trade? I don't think we can. So Rebecca, what do you say?
So I think you're absolutely right. I think if we ignore that particular elephant, we're doing the challenge of doing business in the Middle East a disservice. Now, let's just be very, very, very clear. There are risks. There are risks across the region, but they are more severe in North Africa and that part of the Middle East, rather than the Gulf and all of the countries associated with the Gulf. So we need to make a very clear distinction, because a lot of the countries that actually operate in the Gulf are neutral. So they claim political neutrality, even if they're not actually quite as neutral as they might be. But it would be very, very, very wrong to ignore the risks that we have within the Middle East at the moment. I mean, we pick up our papers every single day, and we have the Israel-Hamas conflict. And the big risk there is obviously of escalation. Now, have a look at what is going on in the region, and there is a very real risk that something happens, it spills over into Lebanon, and that you start to get the involvement of Syria as well, and then Hezbollah, and then Iran, and the whole thing blows up. I think at the moment we're reaching a position where there is no intention to escalate. So Iran has said at this stage it does not intend to escalate. It's got that on hold. It's got a kind of big proviso there, so long as nothing happens that actually disrupts any more than is going on at the minute. So far, so stable. And I'd say, what does that actually mean from a trade point of view? So we have to think about, is the Israel-Hamas conflict actually having an impact on trade? And the first thing that a few people would say, have already said to me is, well, actually, no, it's not having that much impact. But there are several ways in which it's important. Number one is it's actually shown a very positive light on the Gulf countries, so Gulf Cooperation Council. So it's shown a very positive light on Saudi Arabia, on the UAE, on Qatar in particular. And even Egypt, because of its role in Lebanon and its role in helping the Palestinians out, has had a good light shone on it as well. So there's been a lot there that's been very, very positive. The other thing is that in terms of the political risk and a trade perspective, what we've got is actually a fairly localized risk at the moment, which is of ships actually getting into Israel. So we've seen some semiconductors be diverted. We're beginning to see one or two challenges going into Israeli ports, for example. And the final thing is actually around the biggest risk at the moment is in terms of trade finance. And that, as we all know, is a risk that's been there for a very long time. It's looking at where there might be exposure to sanctions, where there might be exposure to sanctioned individuals or export controls. And that's something that's been inherent in the region for a long time. So in a sense, there's nothing new there.
Hicham, what are your thoughts about this?
Very interesting from my perspective to comment on this, because I live there today. I've been living in Dubai actually, and many other Middle East countries for the last 20 years, on and off. And I would say with what's happening now, I would say what is so different than what we've heard in the last 60 or 70 years. Is there an inherent risk? Of course, there is an inherent risk in every time that there is confrontation. But as long as Dr. Rebecca said, there is no conventional country-to-country escalation, I would say that the impact of what's happening right now is very limited. I would say, if you ask me, the war that has impacted the trade in the Middle East is actually the war, Russia-Ukraine, because it has doubled actually the volume of trade between Europe and the Middle East. That's what has impacted the most the trade in the region. Other than this, I think from a total escalation, all the analysts don't think so, because there is a lot at stake for all the countries in the region and the countries that are outside the region. So there will always be, I would say, forces to normalize this situation. Now, what can impact is delaying some of the projects that were ongoing, which in my view can basically put a revolution in terms of development in the area. Talking about the always for the Indian, Middle East, IMEC. Yes, IMEC, for example. It's delaying a little bit. That's a clear impact. But actually, from a risk perspective, it's and then again, it's coming back to another question: is the Middle East? Is it one single block?
Yeah,
is it like, that's the bigger, what is Middle East? It's not like...
let's come back to that question, because I think it's very interesting for the Nordic crowd. But first of all, let's stay on the macro level. What can you tell us about trade between the Middle East and North Africa and the Nordic countries? what facts and data do we have? What flows and investments do you see from a bank perspective between these two regions?
Yeah, well, look, before answering this, I would like to draw a little picture, very summary of what's going on in the Middle East in terms of investment and trade flows in general. There are 4 or 5 key, I would say, drivers of the economy of the different countries, at least in the countries that are not in the red, which we can, as you said, we can discuss about it later. Those key streams are food security is something extremely important for the Middle East. The ESG investment and the transition to net zero is huge in the Middle East. The infrastructure projects and upgrading of the different infrastructure, digitization and logistics. Those are the key 4 or 5 I would say industries that are driving, and of course on top of the existing oil and gas business, which is still a key driver of the economy, but there is a clear net zero target to many of the countries in the region. So that's basically the picture of what's going on. This is where we see major part of the flows of the financing that we see in the Middle East, and this is coming from whether the US, from the Nordics, or Europe, and China, India. Now, coming back to the Nordics, the total exports, I would say, in general, for the Nordics is not as big as in Europe, for example, in terms of relationship with the Middle East. So, it's very difficult to get the data, because coming back to your first point this morning about the Nordics, the Scandinavian, the Middle East, is it the GCC or not GCC? So it's very difficult to get. So I could get some of the data. And for example, you look at today the export from Europe to the Middle East in general, talking about something like 160 billion euro out of a total of 4.2 in total. So talking about 4%, more or less. When it comes to the exports from the Nordics, it varies from 2%, let's say for 1.5%, to 3%, 4% when it comes to Sweden. So Denmark and Norway will be at the lower side, while Sweden will be the driving force of the main trade. So it's mainly equipment and the typical automotive, etc. Now, what at least, maybe from my perspective or from the position where I am, I don't see a lot is in these 4 or 5 sectors that are now actually increasing or driving the economy in the Middle East. We don't see a lot of Nordics companies in the food security and even in the ESG space, which normally you would be like very much expecting to see more Nordics entities doing the work of infrastructure. We don't see that much. That's the general.
If we just stay at the helicopter perspective level for a few more minutes, Rebecca, how has trade between these two regions evolved during the past decades, would you say, and have the relations between them historically been affected by political events?
So I think a slightly short answer to that would be yes, but we need to look at that in a little bit more granular detail. So if you look at trade between the two blocks, the aspect that is incredibly important is obviously oil and gas, and that dominates trade. But there's a few very interesting areas that have developed as well. So, for example, you see a lot of very technical equipment coming in from the Nordics, particularly from Sweden and Denmark, in medical supplies going through into the Middle East, because as the Middle East has developed, and particularly places like the UAE and Saudi Arabia have developed, there's been a lot of imports of medical equipment as well. So that is somewhere where particularly Denmark has benefited. Now, I think so there are always opportunities there, and hasn't been affected by current or past political events. The only thing I would say is that there has been a major shift in the Middle East generally's trade over the last, let's say, 10 to 15 years. So it was quite visible. I remember the first time I went to a GTR conference, it was actually in Dubai, and it feels like it was 100 years ago now. It probably wasn't. It was probably only about 8. But at the time I said we can see quite a direct diversion of trade away from the Middle East towards India, Russia and China. And we were seeing that in the data 8 years ago. And what was really interesting was that in terms of imports and exports, Europe and North America, the trade was actually beginning to trend downwards. Now that was political. I think it's very easy to attribute it to all sorts of other things, but it was actually a movement where you saw frankly, American interests move away from the Middle East politically, and it meant that the trade was also moving as well. And I think now there's something very significant and different happening, which is that we're beginning to see Europe develop its very strong interest in renewable energies, digital as well. But if we focus on renewables, as the Russia-Ukraine crisis has sort of unfolded, there's been two things that have happened. Number one, the imperative to move away from Russian oil and gas, which obviously advantages countries like Qatar, and Saudi Arabia as well. But then there's also been a focus in Norway and the European, but focused around Norway, European Union generally, but focused around Norway's expertise in sustainable energy and renewable energy. So there's research projects there. And because the Middle East is diversifying, and because there's this really strong pattern to move away from just oil and gas dependency itself, what we're seeing is more tourism, we're seeing more in the form of combined research, and that is actually very interesting as an opportunity. And I think we have to, again, go back to this point. There are elephants in the room. The elephant in the room is actually North Africa. It's the conflict that's happening, that's been there, since biblical times. We need now to think about where the opportunities are. COP next week is actually an amazing opportunity to start thinking about those things. So there are opportunities there. They're perhaps at a more micro level than at the big picture level.
So what do you say to all the Nordic companies right now hesitating when it comes to doing business with companies in the Middle East or Northern Africa because they don't have enough knowledge about the region, they're afraid to be perceived as choosing sides or hesitating regarding the risks?
Absolutely, and I think I would say this, wouldn't I, but game those scenarios, work out what those scenarios are, work out where the risks are and manage them, because there are risks everywhere. Now, there are some obvious barriers in the region. So, for example, doing business with Iran has been difficult for the last 5 or 6 years. That's not anything new. And it will be until there is a major geopolitical shift around nuclear deals and things like that. So that is difficult. But I think if you look at the opportunities that are arising, there's a huge amount of investment going into the Middle East in terms of, and the Middle Eastern countries themselves, putting a lot of money into sustainability and representing the Middle East as a hub for trade, and that's the opportunity. And I think so long as those risks are managed and they're thought through, and nobody could have predicted this latest surge of violence. Nobody. I mean, the Israeli intelligence services didn't predict it, so who are we? But I think to know that you are moving into a risky region means that you have to think about where your risks are going to be and manage them very closely, and then it's okay. So it just takes a longer process.
And the start is maybe not to talk about the Middle East as one country. I mean, it is a region, but it is a lot of countries and not one. Is it even one player on the trade scene, would you say, Hicham? Can you elaborate a bit about this?
I'll answer this question, but I would like to actually comment on one point from Dr. Rebecca, which is that the region is shifting, or at least what I understood, shifting a little bit from the dependency on the US also. And I would say that actually there are, of course, some political background to it, but it's not shifting for shifting or to counter as much as it is like a reclaiming of the historical place that it sees itself as trade hub. So the closeness with partners like, I would say, at that time, Russia or China or India, to counter the US is more to reclaim this positioning in the region. And I think that's the main driver. I mean, in my KPIs or my objectives as a banker with my boss, I have non-oil trade as part of my objective. So I can get the, I can tick all the boxes, but then if I don't hit my non-oil targets, then it means it was not a good year. So this is how the region see itself. So it's this reclaiming or this repositioning. I think the COP28 next week is a major event in the whole thing, that the Saudi Vision 30, but the COP28 with the commitment of the countries in the region. And for example, I'm coming to your question. Because
I trust you there.
Because, for example, you look at the country committing net zero by 2050. You have even like the largest oil company in the UAE, ADNOC, committing to be basically 5 years ahead of this. And we being there, we see the investments that are being put into the transition, which are genuinely going into this direction. So coming back to the Middle East as a whole, and in term of rating, credit rating, which is a great indicator when you do trade finance, when you price trade finance, the basic point is, or reference or benchmark will be the credit rating of the country. So in that region, you have countries going from CCC minus to, which is like basically almost default or kind of default, to countries that are AA rated banks. So countries that are on the lower side of the credit rating will be Tunisia right now, which is like the Tunisia and Lebanon at a certain extent. And then you have the intermediary, or the first part of the intermediary, which is like countries like typically Libya, Egypt, Iraq, Morocco, Bahrain, Oman at a certain extent. And then you have the top of the pyramid, which will be basically UAE, and then Saudi, and then Qatar. Those are like the biggest like three classification. Now, the very interesting, you want to do trade finance with basically or thinking from the perspective of an exporter in Sweden. Typically when they want to export to such country, the first thing, or if I would have been an exporter, let's put it this way, for the AA rated bank, I would sell if I have a credit from the bank supporting me, letter of credit, or in some cases the credit of the buyer is at an acceptable rating, then I would say. Now the problem comes for the countries that are on the lowest side. And this is, I would say, applicable to any I would say, treasurer or exporter. But you know what is interesting? There is also a perception into the way to do business. For example, I was very surprised, or actually was expecting it, but we met one client in France a few days ago with my colleagues in France, and they are selling, actually two of them, they are selling to Iraq. And because they know the business very well, they don't want to have any assurance or guarantee. They are comfortable with the risk of Iraq. because they know that actually if they sell to Iraq, they will get paid, there is a budget for it, etc., etc. So while in Egypt might look in a better position, but so much into debt that actually now you need to come. So every case, what I would advise every exporter in the Nordics is every single country is a different country. Every sector is different than the other sector, and he needs to look at all the parameters of trade before saying yes or no. Yeah.
Rebecca, what are your thoughts about this regarding, I mean, to think about how diverse the countries of the MENA region is and the impact on the Nordic companies wanting to do trade?
I think you always, in any international trade, have to think about diversity. Every country is different and has its own unique problems and its own unique advantages as well. I mean, that goes right the way back to Ricardo. So, I mean, we know that dealing with some countries is going to be more difficult than others. And the moral of the story is look back at the sanctions regimes, check out what the export controls are, look at the data, understand what's going on. But always know that there are going to be risks with anything. I think the problem at the moment is that because there are such high-profile parts of the region that have such obvious conflict within them and, you know, and economic instability as well, that is what's creating a perceptional issue. But I think if you go to the countries that are as Hicham says, AAA rated, they are also the ones that are more politically stable. They're also the ones that are leading the charge in terms of making the region the hub that it's always wanted to be within global trade. So that then ties into things like digitization, because the UAE has a very strong digital framework, also has MELITA adoption. So you've got all sorts of things that are going on. And I would say those two things, sustainability and MELITA and digital, are actually the two areas where a huge amount of opportunities exist. And a lot of that, in the end, will come back to how those risks are managed. But they are smaller, proportionate, say, to going into other parts of the region.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say is the region, I mean the Middle East and Northern Africa region, actively doing to, on the global scene, to become a major player more than it is in international trade?
So I think it's obvious. I think it's very high headline stuff. I mean, quite apart from sports and things like that. And you were talking about Erling Haaland earlier. Well, you know, there's also Newcastle. But I mean, there's all sorts of involvement just in terms of trade. The region itself is putting itself in the trade spotlight. So it's putting itself at the top of the COP agenda. It's had the expos. It's putting itself in the place where it is saying it's easier to do trade here. I mean, obviously the tax regimes are extremely advantageous as well, but I think the digital profile, diversification and sustainability, those are the three things that are really distinguishing it from what it's doing. Now, what I would say is trade with Europe is interesting because Europe is a regulatory superpower in the way that other regions of the world aren't. So particularly in terms of sustainability and the new supply chain acts that are coming in, there's going to be a lot of stringent scrutiny of supply chains and supply chain transparency. We talked at the beginning about the issue of data. Data has improved, it's got a lot better, and if you mirror trade data, you find out an awful lot more about what's happening, so you look at imports and exports both ways. But one of the problems is, if you look at trade within the region, it's not fully transparent. So understanding what's going on between Qatar and Saudi, or Qatar and the UAE, is quite difficult because the numbers aren't published. Finding out what's going on between the UAE and Russia is well, it's impossible. Apparently, the UAE hasn't traded with Russia for about the last 3 years. So, you know, that's good. We're all safe, aren't we? So, I mean, this is one of the problems with making any kind of risk assessment. The data is very poor. And I think the region, and something that I would say very loud and clear, the region can help itself, perhaps by learning a little bit around which regulations work and how to collect data and being a bit more transparent around all of those things, acting more as a bloc rather than as disparate nations, in fact.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask you, Hicham, to answer this question as well. I just want to remind the audience that you can ask questions to Hicham and Rebecca in the app, so please do, and I'll pick them up. We have a few minutes left. Hicham, what are your thoughts about what Rebecca just said?
It's
Microphone?
Yeah. It's coming back to the first 2 points on the digitization and sustainability. I think what I see, at least in daily, is that we are now, it's even like the clients, our corporate clients are a big drive in actually pushing us for sustainability-linked solution. So that's something, it's not like a top-down kind of approach, but also coming from the bottom. And I think our partnership in your previous, I would say, enterprise, Dr. Rebecca, is a testament of this, where some clients want to basically establish sustainability-linked supply chain finance, which is something that is spreading in the region. I would say the way we look at it, there is a strong resilience from the top countries in the region to maintain the development cap and the repositioning of the region as a strong trade partner going forward. That's what I would say. Of course, there are the sanctions. It's an issue which is all the places in the world you have players that are sometimes positioned outside the norm, but the general direction and effective implementation of what we're seeing is that there is a strong, stringent aspect around this. Now, some parties can, I would say, go outside the framework, but that's not the general rule. I would say that's what we see in our daily. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have one question from the audience so far, and we only have 5 minutes left, so maybe that's the one we will have time to answer. Okay, there's 3 now. 4 questions. The first one, I guess you, Rebecca, you're the one to answer it. How is Saudi Arabia rethinking its foreign policy priorities concerning plans to normalize ties with Israel?
How long have you got?
Yeah. 30 seconds.
Okay, 30 seconds. It's putting everything on hold at the moment. I mean, what has happened in Saudi Arabia is an attempt to normalize its relations with the world. It's tried to look both ways. It's tried to be independent and increase its influence. Now, there is a huge emphasis behind that in terms of its relationship with America. America has done a lot to try and do more to make Saudi Arabia harmonize the region a little bit more. So, I mean, I think what I would say is at this stage, Saudi Arabia has had, because of its obvious political conflicts at the moment, it's had to put all of that on hold. I think it will take a few months before that starts to come back onto the radar screen again, if indeed it does, because while we have this situation in Israel, and while Israel is taking this action, Saudi Arabia will need to think about its policy priorities. And obviously, America has come out so loudly in favor of Israel that it's very difficult for Saudi Arabia to talk to America as well. So it's just put everything on hold for the time being. I would like to think, and this is just me liking to think and dreaming, I suppose, if you can, but I would like to think that if once the situation stabilizes, everybody looks at what has happened, realizes how horrendous it was, and that the region itself can say, let's make sure that we start to put in place some of those structures that make it a bit easier. But that is a horribly difficult thing to do. It's so complicated. And I think at the moment, yeah, it's wait and see.
Wait and see. Okay, we have time for one more question. This is a very broad one, and I think this is what we have been talking about during the last half hour. But somebody is still asking, what are the opportunities in the MENA region, and why should anyone invest in this region?
Okay. I will try to be more clear this time.
Yes.
The opportunities again are the four or five streams that I mentioned earlier around food security, digitization, infrastructure, sustainability, and logistics. So these are like the big frame. Now. There are other aspects that are happening that are really specific to given countries or region. Talking about COP28 in the UAE, for example, with the commitment for net zero by 2050, they will need to stock the carbon. They will not need to have offsetting. So all of this necessitates infrastructure and investment and operations. So that's one. The Saudi 2030 vision is again a big one with all the projects where the healthcare, education, and all of these aspects are mainstreams of it. So every country will have its own agenda, but there is a lot of opportunities. I mean, if we have time, we can go into each country and say this is like the big drivers of the economy. But one of the most interesting piece on top of the opportunities is I would say, the risk-reward aspect, which is given the region is still provider of liquidity by its own, so the cost of funding of certain transaction can be much more interesting than if you do it in other parts of the world. And number three, and this is more in the expectations that things go back, hopefully, to what it was. And it's a little bit connected to the first question about the Abraham Accords, which is basically the whole India, Middle East corridor trade route. And I was talking with Dr. Rebecca on the side and talking about actually if there is a new trade route that's, at least in our view, will change the way the trade will happen in the future. Is this one, because it's gonna, I mean, it's planned or expected. I don't know if you are all familiar with this new trade route, but it's basically India to UAE, then to Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, then again it goes to the ports from there, and then it arrives to Greece or / Italy. That's basically it. And for me, if there is something that is gonna revolutionize, if it happens, the trade in the future, is this, because 40% of the cost of freighting will be cut, and that's a big one. And that's what I meant also by what's happening now is delaying this, but there is a clear vision to go into this direction.
Okay, we have run out of time. Thank you very much, Hicham El Khaoudy and Rebecca Harding, for joining me in this discussion. Give them a big hand.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I also want to say thank you for the opportunity to host this day. Thank you, GTR. And welcome back on stage, Beatrice Boldini, Head of Business Development, for some closing remarks.
Well, Marion. Hi, everyone. We made it. We are at the end of this long day. Can I just say thank you so much? I know it's been thank you very much. Thank you. I know it's been very long, but I have to say you've been absolutely great. The exhibition room was full, both room was full. I can see a lot of people getting into meetings, coming back. You see, it's coming back again. So it's been great. We couldn't be more proud. I'm excited to say that we're going to have some drinks soon. So just one more minute, I promise. But exciting news is record attendance. So well done to all of you for coming today. Almost reached 600 attendees today, so let's see what we can put together for next year, because we're going to be back in November. We have dates, so actually we haven't finished yet our calendar year. We're in New York next week, New York, just after Thanksgiving, and then we start again next year in Dubai. We're in Cape Town, we're in Riyadh, we're going to be in Turkey, and also we're exploring a very new exciting opportunity for the Central Eastern Europe. So you're going to see GTR in Vienna next October. Now, we've got prizes before drinks. So I've got a couple of raffles to do with you. First, I'm going to go for the GTR because you've been very vocal. So thank you. Because without this, ooh, we've got more. Okay, wait. Because we have a nice prize. We've got some nice earpods. So if you give us feedback, we would like to thank you for this. And thanks, George. Oh yeah, by the way, thank you to the GTR team because Anna Vilka and George Mitchell have been absolutely superb and have been behind all of this organization. And they really deserve this. They really do. Thank you. Right. Jaakko, would you mind coming closer? You're going to pick this one. Exactly. Now, also, it could be a conflict of interest for me, so I'll stay out of this, okay? Right, so let's see who's going to be the winner. If you're not in the room, you already left. Unless you're on a plane, you're not going to get it, so you have to be here. So I'm going to be tough on this. All right, Jaakko, go. Jaakko, don't look. No. And the winner is, shut up, Marion Hollen from Itigram. Well done. Is there a Dutch, situation happening here? I'm not sure. Well done. How is that works? So you see, now you know who you need to talk to, basically. So I have nothing to do with this.
We'll split it, one each.
Congratulations. Thank you, Jaakko. You've been great. You've been great. But thanks. We're going to read all of those and making sure everything is implemented if you need more from us next year. And now we've got one other raffle. And I know everyone was very excited. I'm a daughter of a footballer, so I also was very excited. We have, please come on stage if you want to join us. Standard Chartered brought us a star of football. Sammy has been with us the whole day. He's been signing autograph, and we've been kindly asking for business cards. Why? Because the winner is going to take home a fully signed Liverpool shirt. We're not, it's not a joke. Actually, this is happening. This is real, authentified. So, you're going to do that.
Took part of it.
Mix it.
Mix it.
Let's see.
Oh. Magic hands.
And the winner, Rodrigo Costeira, MCA, Empowering Lives for Generation. Enrico, ¿dónde estás? Oh no, he's here. I can see a hand. I can see a hand. Congratulations. That's great. I hope you support Liverpool. Now you do. Now you do. There you go, perfect. I'm sure they're going to take us a picture on stage for you. That's great, congratulations. That's great, thank you for joining us. So thank you so much, it's been great, thank you so much. Thank you. And last but not least, we've got a wonderful sponsor. I'm going to thank you all because all these sponsors have been incredible. So let's wait until next year. And kindly, Raiffeisen Bank decided to sponsor our drinks reception. And I know you're all parched, a little bit like me. So I'm going to ask Jyrki Ranta to join me on stage. Where is he gone? Oh, here you are. Perfect. There you go. And we've got a nice raffle, so please come and join us on stage. And I would like to ask, Jyrki is going to say a couple of words. I do promise it's a couple of words. Also, he's finished, so I promise it's going to be short and sweet. Yeah? And then we're going to have drinks. But I'm going to leave the floor to Jyrki to carry on. I'm going to be behind you for the raffle, if you want me to.
Need your help.
No problem at all. But do stay around. The drinks are going to be here, and you can take off your tie. It's a bit more relaxed now. So, but a big thank you to all of you. It's been great. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Beatrice. You are really keeping me on a tight leash here. So max 2-3 minutes. Just wanted to mention perhaps a couple of points that are relevant still to the audience at this very late hour before we start with the drinks. I've had a number of bilateral meetings today, and a couple of the themes that have been recurring in just about all of the discussions have been Ukraine and certain type of export finance transactions. Now, why Ukraine? Well, in the case of Raiffeisen Bank, it's one of our home markets. As some of you may know, we are quite big in all over Central Eastern Europe. We are present in 12 different markets. And in some of them, we are the biggest bank. And we are a universal bank in all of them, doing also retail banking, corporate banking, investment banking. In the case of Ukraine, we are the biggest international bank in that market. And of course, everybody, when I think about the corporates in the Nordic region, quite a few of them are really positioning themselves in terms of the rebuilding effort that hopefully will start the sooner the better. Last week there was the big conference in Warsaw. Probably quite a few of your companies were represented in there. And it's going to be a massive capital inflow. At the moment we are talking about between 400 to 500 billion euros flowing into the country. It's, the banks are doing their best. We are fully operational there on the ground. So if your companies are looking at the Ukrainian market as a potential opportunity, we are one of the speaking partners that you can always reach out to. One exciting development yesterday was actually that Raiffeisen Ukraine signed an agreement with the US government, one of the US government agencies, Development Finance Corporation. Development Finance Corporation, they are granting a $40 million line. It's a portfolio guarantee line, loan portfolio guarantee line to Raiffeisen Ukraine in order to support Raiffeisen Ukraine to give lending to small and micro-sized companies in Ukraine. And this is really the backbone of the economy. So we shouldn't just wait passively for the peace possibly to come, but we need to actively support the society in terms of to have it sustainable and keep the motivation up of the people. So Ukraine is one of the topics that are really close to our heart. The other topic that has been discussed today with various clients is the, so to say, the dark corner of the export finance market, which is the small ticket transactions. We are talking about between 2 to 10 million euros ECA-supported biocredit transactions. Well, in the case of our bank, we have a solution available. We call it the eSpeed Track. It's a fully digitalized platform. And we have also a couple of the Nordic ECAs onboarded into the program, so we can come up with quick decisions and get the loan transactions done. So if any of you exporters are struggling with the small ticket transactions, we have a solution. There is the clock there, and it's on red. I've exceeded my time, I suppose. So, ice hockey. Some of you may have noticed that we have the table ice hockey game at our stand. The reason behind that is that we have been sponsoring also the Ice Hockey World Championship tournament for the past 10 years or so, so it's close to our heart. And now somebody is going to win this table ice hockey game, and we are going to courier it to his or her office. One less headache regarding potential Christmas presents. Let's do it this way. If you want to draw a name, yeah, please.
I'm going to go for the last one. I was going to be for the first person, put it in. And if it's my name?
Yeah, well,
9?
you can.
No?
Marie Tveit.
DNB. DNB? Marie?
Marie Tveit, DNB, here. What do we do then?
Well, it's up
Are
to
we
you.
strict?
I tend to be strict, but it's up to you. You decide.
Let's do it the hard way. But there has to be a limit.
You got to be here.
Max 1 minute.
Come on.
And then, no?
Ooh la la. Okay. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, is it Victoria Schiltz?
Victoire.
Victoire Schiltz.
Yay! It's here. Perfect. Come on stage. It's amazing. Take a picture.
Super.
Shake a hand. That's brilliant. I really wanted this. It's very lucky. This you can do a nice,
All right.
nice picture together.
Picture. Important.
Okay, camera. Okay, here we go.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Yes, I am also a Finn, and the Finn in me says that thank you. You know, let's cut the crap. Let's go out for the drinks.
Let's do
Thank
that.
you.
Tack så mycket. Thanks everyone.